Hi friends and welcome back to my channel. I am so excited to have you here for another video and this is going to be a really good one. Today we are diving into the world of true crime and specifically we are going to be talking about why us women are so obsessed with it. But before we get into today's video, I want to tell you about a brand that I've been working with and they are called BU period. These are their monthly patches and I absolutely love them, and I have a little discount code to share with you if you want to try them out for yourself. BU periods are an amazing feminine healthcare brand. They have loads of different products. They actually have just launched their own CBD line as well. But these are by far my favorite. I initially found these monthly patches because honestly, I was like trying anything to help with my cramps. I get really severe cramps in my stomach and lower back, and I came across these patches online and I thought may as well give it a try, and they're amazing. You get a pack of 5. They're really thin, super discreet. You just apply them to whatever area is painful. So for me that is my lower tummy and lower back. You can keep them on for up to 12 hours, so you can have them on the whole day, and you can have them on in bed at night if you want as well, and no one can tell you're wearing them. It's not like having a hot water bottle or a microwave teddy strapped to your stomach, which is what I used to do. They provide a really nice cooling sensation, and I found that weird at first because I'd always used heat to try and cure my period cramps or help with my cramps. But actually, there's research that has shown that heat is not good for our cramps because it causes the blood vessels to constrict. So these patches are made with menthol and eucalyptus that slowly releases over a period of 12 hours, and that provides a nice cooling sensation which encourages normal blood flow and actually helps ease the pain of your cramps. So if you suffer with cramps like I do, then I would definitely recommend trying these, and you can use my code SARAH10 to get 10% off your first order. That code also works for anything else that you might find on their website, so I'll have that linked below. And thank you so much to BU for working with me. I love this brand so much. Okay, so let's get into today's video. Why are us women so obsessed with true crime? So I wanted to start telling you a little bit about my personal background. I have been obsessed with true crime. I mean, obsessed is a strong word. I prefer interested. I would say I started consuming true crime content probably in my late teens, early 20s. Certainly when big Netflix documentaries like Making a Murderer came out, I got really invested in that. But before that, I was obsessed with shows like CSI, Criminal Minds. I loved to try and work out, what was going to happen and who the criminal was and what they were doing and why they were doing what they were doing. Like, I just loved that whole thing. I actually used to want to be a criminal psychologist, but I just find it so fascinating. And lately, my heavy interest in true crime has sort of evolved. So it's not all to do with like serial killers. I now actually find it really interesting to dive into topics like pyramid schemes and multi-level marketing companies, fraud, the whole Anna Delvey thing, that was a big Netflix dramatization of that as well. The Elizabeth Holmes Theranos story as well. So all these kind of stories about con artists and fraudsters, I found that really interesting as well. Most recently, I have just watched the documentary on Netflix about DB Cooper, the guy that hijacks a plane and gets away with 200 grand. So that was really interesting. Highly recommend watching that if you haven't already. But my love of true crime has led me to connect with other people that also are interested in true crime, and they tend to be women. And so that kind of prompted the question in my head, like, why is it always women that are into these serial killer documentaries or consume this content? It also struck me that loads of true crime content creators are female. Two of my favourite true crime YouTube channels are Bailey Sarian and Kendall Ray, which are of course female, and loads of the true crime podcasts that you may have heard of or listened to are run by women. There is one podcast called Wine and Crime, which I love that title, by the way, and they reported that they get 500,000 downloads each month, and 85% of their audience is female. So clearly there's a correlation here. Clearly us women are a little bit obsessed with true crime. So that kind of sparked the question in my head of why is that? So I decided to pick up this book, Savage Appetites by Rachel Monroe, because this is an exploration and an investigation of this phenomenon, why women are so obsessed with true crime. In this book, Rachel Monroe breaks down the women at the centre of this true crime phenomenon into 4 different categories. And if you're a woman obsessed with true crime, you probably fall into one of these 4 categories. So those are the detective, the victim, the defender, and the killer. So I wanted to talk a little bit about these four categories and where I think I personally find myself within them, and maybe it'll help you identify where you might fall within them. I mean, we're all hoping that we don't fall under the last one because, yeah, that would be disturbing. So let's talk about the detective category. So in the first section of the book, Rachel Monroe talks about an amazing woman called Frances Glessner Lee. I really hope I'm saying that name right. Anyway, she was born in 1878 and she died in 1962, and she's often referred to as the mother of forensic science. So, Frances essentially created miniature depictions of crime scenes for trainee homicide investigators to look at and assess and see if they could work out what had happened in that crime scene. They were like tiny, perfectly to scale, like doll's houses. Like, think about a really morbid doll's house where they have like tiny weapons, they had blood spatter, they had little people. I mean, I will try and insert some pictures, but these things were just absolutely amazing. And they ended up being called the nutshells. And I think she made in total 19 of them. And as I said, they were used to train homicide investigators. The level of detail that she had in these miniatures was absolutely amazing. And especially for her time, you know, she was born in 1878. Women, there was not female detectives, like, women were not accepted or welcomed in the forensic science community, but she found her way in using essentially a woman's skill, you know, making dolls' houses, making models. Like, I just, yeah, I think she's absolutely amazing. That's so cool what she did. So, Frances is a great example of the detective type. And I think a lot of women who consume true crime content fall into this category. You know, we want to try and solve a mystery at the end of the day. When I was younger, I loved Scooby Doo because I like loved trying to work out who the villain was before they unmasked them. And even if I couldn't, I love the whole air of mystery around it, looking for clues, trying to work out what they mean. It's just a bit of fun. And I think, as I said, that evolved when I got older, watching shows like CSI and Criminal Minds. I just love to feel like an investigator, like a detective. And I think a lot of people, not just women, a lot of people enjoy feeling like that as well. Weirdly enough, a lot of people find shows about crime soothing in a way. I know that this sounds kind of disturbing, but there is actually a reason behind it. Shows like CSI, Criminal Minds, I don't know, insert another show of that genre in here, offer a sense of closure. Everything can be explained and solved at the end. It's all wrapped up in a nice little bow. The murderer leaves their signature or a print or a piece of evidence, and everything is wrapped up neatly at the end. So, in this way, they're kind of comforting. It's like it puts out this false narrative that everything is just solvable and, you know, we'll eventually get to the bottom of it, which is quite satisfying to watch. So, do you fall into this archetype of the detective? Do you like to solve a mystery? Are you a bit of an internet sleuth? I think, I don't know, I'm going to go through the rest of them, but for me personally, I do think I probably fall into this category because it's just a bit of fun to try and solve a mystery, isn't it? So, the second archetype is the victim. In this section, Rachel Monroe talks about the relationships we have to the victims of crime. Now, what I find really interesting, now that I say it out loud, it seems very, very obvious, but the more we can relate to a victim of crime, the more interested we are in their story and their crime and what happened to them. And it therefore follows on that because so many women are unfortunately victims of crime, it stands to reason that there would be a higher population of women interested in true crime because they identify with the victim. A good example of this from my personal life is when I was younger, there was a case, a really, really big case about two girls. I think they were maybe 12 years, 11, 12 years old, something like that. They were called Holly and Jessica. Pretty sure this happened down in England. If you're from the UK, you'll probably be familiar with this case. It was like early 2000s this happened. Really, really sad case. These two girls, Holly and Jessica, were friends and they were actually killed by, I think it was the janitor from their school. So it was someone that they knew. And I also think he had help potentially from a female. I'll need to look into it. I could maybe actually do a video about it. But anyway, what I'm trying to get at is these were two girls, young 11, 12-year-old girls. They were best friends and they were killed by someone that they knew. And it was really, really tragic. And at the time, me and my best friend were the exact same age as Holly and Jessica. And we always used to go and hang out together. And I remember when this case was happening, and I didn't really follow the news. Like at 11, 12 years old, you're not really following the news, but it was like you could not avoid hearing about this case. So I definitely knew about this case. My mum and dad were following it, so were my friends' mum and dad. I mean, so was everyone. Like it was just one of those cases. Like, I remember feeling like I related to those girls and thinking like, what would I do if I was in that situation? Like even as a young girl, I was like, oh, I see myself in them. Like that could have been me and my best friend, you know. And yeah, we would have stopped and spoke to the school janitor with no problem. Like you don't think these people are out to get you. So it was really, really scary. It definitely created a lot of fear. And I remember when I would go out with my friend, if I would go round to her house, like my mum and dad would make me call as soon as I got to her house and to let them know I was there. I think my curfew was set earlier, so I had to be home a bit earlier. Like this created a big sort of hysteria at the time. I think that just goes to show that when you relate to the victim, like I did with those girls, or my parents probably related to their parents and wanted to, of course, avoid anything like that happening to us, it just does bring a new level of interest and connection with a case. So I think this one definitely does make sense. I mean, think of celebrities that fall victim to true crime. It's undeniable. We're definitely more interested when it's someone that we perceive to have some knowledge of, when it's someone in the public eye. So think about, Princess Diana, about Sharon Tate, Kurt Cobain, Marilyn Monroe, all these different people that are so in the public eye. When something happens to them, everyone's interested, everyone's heartbroken, everyone's curious, everyone's fascinated by it because, in some level, we feel as if we know who they are and we identify with them in some way. I think this one is a really good reasoning for why predominantly women are obsessed with true crime, is because most victims of violent crimes are women, unfortunately. And studies have actually shown that crimes committed against women are often committed by people that are close to them. Around 2/3 of murdered women are killed by family members or intimate partners, and only 10% are killed by strangers. I guess thinking about that, like that kind of led me to think that maybe we're so interested in true crime because, whether consciously or subconsciously, I'm not sure, but we're almost trying to protect ourselves from becoming the victim. Like we want to hear about how these things happened and why they happened so that we can be like, okay, well, I won't do that, or I'll avoid that. I won't wear that or go to that place, or I don't know. Like, I definitely think that sometimes consuming too much true crime can make you paranoid, especially as a young woman. Like if I like out my car at night, I'm like ready to fight someone, because I have consumed so much of it. But I think there is this idea that I can protect myself. I can hear about all these bad things that happen and be like, right, what would I do? Let's have a camera here. Let's have a weapon here. It's sad, but I do think there is a big element of truth to that. So yeah. Are you interested in true crime because you're trying to protect yourself from becoming victim of it? Possibly. So the third archetype is the defender. And in this section of the book, Rachel Monroe talks about the women that defend people accused of committing crimes, for better or for worse. Now, you've probably heard about the women that idolise people like Charlie Manson or Ted Bundy and write love letters to them in jail. That's not really what we're talking about in this section, at least that's not what I'm talking about. But there are also some amazing women that stand up for those who've been wrongfully convicted and actually even see their cases and appeals through to the end and get them out of jail, which is just absolutely amazing. I guess there's nothing that will get you more fired up about a case than if you believe that the person that's sitting in jail for it, and potentially maybe even on death row for it, didn't actually do it. But again, it is predominantly women that find themselves in these situations fighting for people that have been, at least in their mind, wrongfully accused. Now, I spoke about the West Memphis 3 case in an earlier video, so I'll have that linked below if you're interested in that. But in a very, very, very brief summary, the West Memphis 3 case was a case where 3 young guys were wrongfully accused and convicted of murdering 3 children as part of a satanic ritual. Now, Damien Eccles, who was said to be the leader of this satanic cult ritual thing, he was actually sentenced to death, and his partner Laurie was the driving force to getting him released, which eventually he was. This story thankfully has a happy ending. I mean, I say happy ending, they all did spend 18 years in prison for something they didn't do, but thankfully Damien was not executed and he is now a free man. And a lot of that is down to this amazing woman, Laurie. And obviously Laurie was his partner, so she's got a, vested interest in this. But most of her investigative team and the most ardent supporters of freeing the West Memphis 3 were also women. So I'm going to read this bit of the book out because I think it kind of explains why it is mainly women that find themselves defending the wrongfully accused and really sticking it out for the long haul. So, this is what it says in the book. We all know that men are the strongest runners, racking up the fastest times at dashes and marathons alike. But in races over 100 miles, when psychological staying power is more important than muscle mass, women often cross the finish line first. Women are more likely to live through dire survival situations. That's partly because women have more subcutaneous fat, but anthropologists also chalk some of the survival rate disparity up to socialised, gender based personality differences. When a situation requires grim determination, a willingness to settle in and fight the long fight, women seem to have the advantage. For better or worse, we'd adapt at slogging. So I find that really interesting, and with that perspective on it, I can totally understand now why it is mainly women because we are just used to having to literally fight for everything and also used to doing thankless tasks. We are brought up in a society that expects us to keep a clean house and have babies and raise babies and teach our children and look after our husbands and take care of our family and do all these things. And a lot of that, particularly the home-based things like raising children, keeping the home, are pretty thankless tasks. We don't really get commended for it often. So we're kind of used to just like slogging on in the background, working away, grinding away without much thanks for it. And so maybe in that way, we're just better adapted to doing work like this, which for the most part is pretty thankless. Apart from, of course, when you do get someone released like this, like the West Memphis 3 case, when those guys were eventually released and Damien was taken off death row, obviously that's a massive achievement, but there's a lot of cases where that doesn't happen. And even when it does happen, it can take a really long time. There's a lot of background work that goes into it that no one sees. So yeah, maybe as women we're just used to it. We're just used to working for nothing. We're just used to working in the background and being a bit of the unseen driving force behind these big changes. And honestly, I think that's an amazing thing. I think women are amazing. We basically have it programmed in us to just work hard with very, very little thanks, if any at all. And we have this amazing capability to keep going when things are tough and against all odds. And I think that's a really remarkable thing, to be honest. So if you're a defender, if you're someone that fights for social justice, then keep up the good work. So the last section of the book is about the killer. Now, this is obviously the archetype that we don't want to find ourselves in, but it's kind of scary how easily we can be led down this path. So, in this section of the book, Rachel Monroe looks into the romanticisation and glorification of mass murderers, particularly the Columbine Killers. So, again, if you're not familiar with this case, the Columbine mass shooting was a case where two young teenage guys took guns into their school and committed a mass shooting and eventually shot themselves. Really, really horrible case. But weirdly, there are groups of people online who call themselves the Columbiners that actually, for want of a better term, idolize these people and romanticize what they did. I know, it's weird. It's extremely problematic. But one of those people that identified as a Columbiner was a lady called Lindsay Souvannarath, and she was actually quite active in the Tumblr community that idolized these Columbiners. And Lindsay actually convinced her boyfriend and one of his friends to try and carry out a copycat attack in her boyfriend's hometown of Halifax in a shopping centre. They planned to get all dressed up in black, have a proper aesthetic going, get some weapons, I believe from James's dad, or maybe it was his friend's dad, and shoot up the shopping mall in Halifax. Luckily, her plan did not work. She was actually, I think, arrested at the airport on her way into Halifax. I'm not going to get into her whole case, but if you do want to hear more about it, I would highly suggest listening to the Nighttime podcast coverage of it. I will link that in the notes below as well. But Jordan, the host of Nighttime podcast, actually gets to interview Lindsay from jail, and it is eye-opening, to say the least. So the thing to be aware of is that these online communities do exist. There are places online that idolize people like the Columbine shooters and other criminals. And in some cases, it starts with, maybe just an interest, maybe a passing interest that develops into a bit of an obsession, that develops into, a fascination. And all of a sudden, you're so wrapped up in it that you think that they did the right thing and you want to mimic that and you want to copy that. And that's really, really scary. But I think, especially in this like social media age, it's something that can very easily happen, especially if you are someone that feels like an outcast from society, if you feel like you don't fit in anywhere, if you're bullied, if you're, isolated. At the end of the day, you're looking for somewhere to belong. I think most of these people that find themselves in these situations, you're looking for some purpose, you're looking for some sense of belonging, some higher calling, if you like. That's why people join these right wing extremist, like Nazi groups as well, because they don't belong anywhere. They feel outcast. They feel like they don't have any power. And then suddenly this group comes along that offers them this semblance of family, that offers them support, that maybe even offers them money, that offers them status. They've got power. All of a sudden people are afraid of them. Like, that's very alluring to someone that has just felt like they've been totally ignored their whole life. So it's definitely something to watch out for. I think since the Lindsay Souvannarath case, Tumblr put in new restrictions so that they could really limit these groups that were fascinated by things like the Columbine shootings and things like that. But ultimately, these people will find places to gather. I think you can put restrictions on whatever you like, but I do think it's something that is going to happen. I know that there's plenty of right wing extremist groups as well. It's one of these things that unfortunately is going to happen, and they prey on people like Lindsay that always felt outcast, that felt like no one cared about them, or that are, suffering with mental health issues like depression and things like that. That is who they prey upon. So I guess this is a bit of a cautionary tale to just be extra careful with the groups and what you're looking up online. And I guess if you know of anyone that is a little bit too obsessed with things like that, like maybe check in on them and just make sure their moral compass isn't being skewed. And I guess actually that leads me on to one of my last points, is that it is good to be mindful of the amount of true crime content that you are consuming. Try and strive for some sort of balance. There was a time where I was just consuming far too much true crime content and I was becoming a little bit paranoid in my everyday life. And that's not healthy and it's not good. And you also want to be consuming lots of love and light and positive content as well, so that you're not keeping yourself in a sort of fear loop and consuming a lot of negativity all the time. So it's totally fine to be interested in it and to watch the documentaries and listen to the podcast and all that kind of stuff and chat about it with your friends. But just be careful. Don't overload yourself with it. So that was my little discussion on why us women are so obsessed with true crime, which was greatly helped by the book Savage Appetites by Rachel Monroe. I will have this book linked below if you do want to check it out. I highly recommend it because it is so good, so interesting, and it delves a lot further into all the things that I discussed in this video in a lot greater depth. And I would also love to know where you think you fall within these archetypes. Are you a bit of a defender? Do you like fighting for social justice? Are you a detective? Are you interested in the victim? Are you trying to protect yourself from all the evils in the world? Let me know in the comments below where you think you fall in this spectrum. Also, one final little thing that I did want to say before I wrap this video up is, remember when you are consuming true crime content that as much as for you it is just an interesting story, something to pass the time, for the people involved, these are real people. This is real tragedies. These are real lives that have been affected. And I know personally it is very easy to forget that and just get swept up in sort of enjoying consuming the content. But it is worth being mindful that these are real people and to be respectful of that. So yeah, thank you so much for watching this video. I really enjoyed making this one and doing a bit of research for this one. I just find it so fascinating, the sort of psychology and sociology behind why women in particular are obsessed with true crime. If you want more videos like this, please like this video and leave me a comment below. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. I am trying to get to 100 subscribers by the end of the year. I've been making videos pretty consistently now for the past couple months and I'm really loving it. So I'm trying to remember to ask people to subscribe. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. Again, if you want to support the channel, you can use my affiliate link to get 10% off any of your BU purchases. Everything you need will be in the description below. But thank you so much for watching. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you next time. Bye!